Raiders head coaching search guaranteed to heat up this week. That plus more coming up on Monday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for January 26, 2026.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one sports podcast network. We're very proud of that. We're also very proud of the fact that this show continues to grow each and every day, and that's because of your constant support, Raider Nation. So shout out to you, and also the great job that my man Ari does behind the scenes, making sure we look good and sound good by way of the YouTube page. And when I say that, I truly do mean that. I meet so many people each and every day that say they watch us every single day on the YouTube page, and that's great. That's awesome. I mean, the show has grown in such a major way by way of YouTube, and that's all 100% because of my man Ari. So shout him out. He's on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can find me as well at your boy Q254. And we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line for you, 707-654-4693. A lot of great calls, a lot of great texts. We'll get to as many as possible coming up in segment number 3. I know I won't get through all of them, but I got a lot of good stuff, so I'll definitely try to hustle through as many as possible. That'll be in segment number 3. Segment number 2, we'll talk about the quarterback position, and we all believe the Raiders will draft at number 1 overall, being Fernando Mendoza, now that he officially declared for the NFL draft. He did that on Friday, as many of us expected, but a lot of people are saying the Raiders, wait, hold on, they're not ready to draft a franchise quarterback. Well, I'll tell you why. A team that's actually in the Super Bowl, going to be in the Super Bowl, now that we know who's playing, has proven that you can get a quarterback, even if you're not necessarily, in air quotes, ready to draft that quarterback. We'll talk about that coming up in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, news and notes of the day, and it all has to do 100% with the Raiders and their head coaching search. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. There's a lot of different reports that came out over the weekend. Obviously, we saw the championship games, both AFC and NFC, and the Broncos, they lost, and the Rams, they lost. So now the guys that are available to be hired right now, if you're looking at the Rams roster, you can look at Mike LaFleur, their offensive coordinator, Nate Shieldhouse, their passing game coordinator, Chris Shula, their defensive coordinator. All three guys the Raiders have interviewed. So if they wanted to go ahead and interview and hire them this week, they could, now that their season is wrapped up. I think Nate Shieldhouse is actually the leader in the clubhouse for the Browns job. We'll see how that all plays out. Chris Shula and Mike LaFleur, we'll see what happens if they stay in L.A. or if they do find jobs elsewhere, head coaching jobs, that is. I don't think that those are the guys that the Raiders are in on, but they are available. Also available is Denver Broncos passing game coordinator Davis Webb. Now, that's a guy that I do believe the Raiders have a lot of interest in. As a matter of fact, Albert Breer, Monday Morning Quarterback, SI.com, he was talking about Davis Webb, and, a lot of people are looking at him and saying, yeah, but he's too early. He's only 30 years old. He's not, hasn't been coaching long enough. He's not ready to be a head coach. Well, if he brings in an experienced offensive coordinator, I do think that could be a difference maker, and even just an experienced coaching staff in general. But here's Albert Breer talking about Davis Webb and what he brings to the table and the ties, the coaches that he has ties with that have ties with Tom Brady, which obviously is very important. Here's Albert Breer.
Davis Webb, to me, might be the most interesting name, though. He's incredibly well thought of. He hasn't coached for very long is the problem, but he played in the league recently. He's, my understanding, got a passing relationship with Tom Brady, but he's got 2 offensive coordinator names that I know are on this list that have tight connections to Brady. And one is Brian Daboll, who could wind up going to Tennessee as the coordinator, could go to Buffalo as the head coach, but Brian Daboll's one name for Davis Webb. They were together both in New York and Buffalo when Davis was a player. And the other is Cliff Kingsbury, who almost went to Vegas a couple of years ago as a coordinator, who's tight with Brady. And so I think Davis Webb has a ton of head coach qualities. And I think part of it is the same thing with the Rams had with McVay, right? Which is, I remember talking to the Rams front office people when they hired Sean, and the whole thing was, well, we can hire him now a year early, or we just won't get him at all, because if he doesn't get a job this year, he's going to get one next year, and we're not going to be looking for one next year, right? So I think with Davis, that's part of the logic is, do we go in early on a guy, a year early with a guy, bring in an experienced offensive coordinator who can work with the quarterback and just bet on this guy's upside?
So you hear him talking about Brian Daboll, hear him talking about Cliff Kingsbury, and the funny thing is, the reason I bring that up is because Brian Daboll was interviewed for the first time over the weekend for the Raiders head coaching job. And I don't think that they were actually interviewing him to be the head coach. I think that they were interviewing him to be a potential OC. And that's what I tweeted out. And I don't think I worded it very well on Twitter when I did that. I was trying to figure it out, and people were like, no, because I said, maybe, what did I say? How did I word it? Maybe Davis Webb's OC. And they're like, no, Davis Webb will be the head coach and Daboll the OC. That's what I was trying to say. I think that Brian Daboll could go with Davis Webb and be the OC. But that was the first time that we even heard about Brian Daboll and the Raiders since the rumor came out before Pete Carroll even got fired that, Brian Flores was going to be the head coach and Brian Daboll would be the OC. Hadn't heard anything about Brian Daboll until this past weekend. So he interviewed for the first time on Saturday. On Sunday, Joe Brady, also from the Buffalo Bills. Daboll was with the Bills before he went to the Giants, but they both had the Bills ties. Joe Brady, he interviewed for the second time. That was on Sunday with the Raiders. So, again, it's another guy I look at and think that they're probably interviewing him as an OC as opposed to the head coach. But getting the head coaching interview is how you get him in the building and talk to him. And that was the second time that the Raiders talked to Joe Brady. So definitely something to pay attention to there. But I feel like Davis Webb, Klint Kubiak, and Coach Mike McDaniel are definitely all in the mix for the Raiders head coaching job, with Mike McDaniel, who's set to be the offensive coordinator for the Chargers, as the third guy up. He's basically the backup plan if the other two plans don't work. I honestly believe it goes Kubiak, who's Seattle's offensive coordinator. They advanced to the Super Bowl, so he cannot officially be hired till after the Super Bowl's over. The Raiders can interview him this week. As a matter of fact, them and the Cardinals are the only two teams that can interview him again if they so choose to. And again, Super Bowl bye week interviews are only allowed if the interviewing team has already held a previous interview with the candidate. Initial interviews must wait until February 9th. Potential coaching candidates on the Seahawks and Patriots will be eligible for virtual interviews from January 26th to February 1st. After that, they must wait until February 9th to open up communication or meet in person, and they are not allowed to sign a contract until their season is done. So again, Klint Kubiak, because the Raiders have already met with him, can, again, have another interview with the Raiders, and maybe they can come up with a verbal agreement. Obviously, nothing could be actually signed, sealed, and delivered, but basically seeing what Klint Kubiak did and the way that he was able to run that offense for the Seahawks on Sunday and really throughout the course of the year makes him the leader in the clubhouse for me, not to mention Tom Brady's on the call and has been on the call for many Seahawk games. So I really do think he likes what Kubiak brings to the table. And obviously Tom Brady is very heavily involved in this head coaching search. And right after that, I think it's Davis Webb. Shefty on Saturday, as a matter of fact, Adam Schefter from ESPN said the Raiders are expected to meet this week with Broncos passing game coordinator, quarterback coach Davis Webb regarding their head coaching vacancy. The Bills also want to meet with Webb about their head coach job, but due to NFL rules, must wait until Denver season's over, whenever that is. Well, Denver season is over, so the Buffalo Bills can meet with Webb. So let's just say for S's and giggles, let's throw it like that, Davis Webb agrees to a deal with the Bills. And then maybe Kubiak decides to stay in Seattle because I know Seattle's trying to put a full court press on him to keep him. Then that's when Michael McDaniel, who, again, as I mentioned, is supposed to be the offensive coordinator for the Chargers, that's when he comes into play as the Raiders' potential head coach, as far as I'm concerned. So just a little bit of updates, again, as where the head coaching search goes. But I think we'll learn a lot this week, and we'll have a really good idea well before Super Bowl 60 even takes place. But, Mike McCarthy, he got hired in Pittsburgh, so now there's only 4 head coaching job vacancies still open: the Bills, the Browns, the Cardinals, and the Raiders. And right after the Bills, I think the Raiders is the best-looking job that still remains. I think there's a lot of people looking at the Browns job like, yeah, not so much. And the Cardinals, who knows what they're going to do, especially with their quarterback possession, Kyler Murray. But, so I think, like I said, the Raiders, you'll definitely learn a lot about their head coaching search and what direction they want to go coming up this week. But coming up next, we're going to talk about Fernando Mendoza, and many say that the Raiders aren't ready to draft a quarterback. I'll tell you why they are. That's coming up, segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about a couple great sponsors we have here on the show, and the first one is Prize Picks. The big game is almost here. There's no better way to stay locked into every moment than with Prize Picks. It's a daily fantasy app where it always feels good to be right. With football season coming down to its final stretch, now's the perfect time to close it out strong. Prize Picks makes watching the game even more exciting by letting you build simple lineups around player projections. No drafts, no waiting, just football action all the way through the playoffs. And we know it's down to one game. Championship games in the book. It's all about the big game. Prize Picks is easy to get started. Pick 2 or more players and choose more or less on their projections, just like that. Early payouts. It'll let you cash out if a player gets hot right at the start. Whatever you want to do, boom, you can make it happen. Love being able to mix stars from different teams and build lineups that fit how you watch the game. Again, you're in total control. And the new social feed makes it fun to follow friends, share lineups, and get inspiration from other players. Right now, download the Prize Picks app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's promo code LOCKEDONNFL. It's all one word for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. I also want to tell you about Robinhood. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time. With Robinhood Prediction Markets, it's not you against the house, it's you participating in a live market. You could buy or sell your positions live, all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood Prediction Markets changes the game. It's people moving the action, so when momentum shifts, you can move with it. You always thought that you knew the game, but you never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now you can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood. Now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk, is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to get into the conversation about the Raiders drafting the quarterback. Obviously, they've had the number 1 overall pick, but there's a lot of people that say the Raiders aren't ready to draft a quarterback. Matter of fact, Big Ben Roethlisberger, he actually has a podcast, which a lot of folks have podcasts, so shout out to him for that. But on his podcast, he was saying if he was in charge of the Steelers, he wouldn't draft a quarterback right now because they have too many holes. So he said he'd wait 2 or 3 years. Well, a lot of people are looking at the Raiders saying, no, trade the pick, get more, capital, get more first-round picks, build up the team, and then go get the quarterback. But I'm going to explain why I think the Raiders should do it. But I thought it was a really good breakdown on Unsportsmanlike on ESPN Radio. Evan Cohen was talking to Dan Orlovsky about if teams really can be in a position not to draft their quarterback or maybe not be ready. And Dan gave a really good explanation and breakdown of it. So here it is right here. Check it out.
Ben Roethlisberger had an interesting comment about some teams are not ready for quarterbacks. I tend to very much agree with him. You were a quarterback. Do you agree with that assessment that some teams should avoid actually getting their quarterbacks for the future because they're not ready?
I think, one, it depends on who the quarterback is that we're talking about. You know, there are guys that you just do not move away from bringing in your building. I remember years ago when Cincinnati was at the number 1 pick and it was the Joe Burrow, and there were people saying trade down. I think Washington might have been at 2, and they were like, trade down, let Washington go up to 1. You can get Chase Young and more picks. And it was no. You do not move off of this pick. So it depends on the quarterback. But yeah, there's a lot of clear evidence that more often than not, teams aren't ready to not only take a quarterback and play with them, but a young quarterback and play with them. And so if you don't have the right supporting cast around, and then you don't have the right people in your building to figure out how to develop that quarterback and the actual time frame committed to develop that quarterback, there's a lot of evidence to sit there and say, yeah, don't take him. But I do think it's a little dependent upon what guy you're choosing to pass on.
So there's Dan Orlovsky right there on ESPN talking about certain guys you go get regardless. Right? Do you have someone in the building who could develop them? Supporting cast, patience to develop. And look, this is the thing. The Raiders might not be technically in the position there where they should go draft a quarterback and, okay, they're going to be that great team right now, right? And so many people have said, Q, the Raiders aren't one quarterback away from being a contender. You're right about that. But you don't know that the position that you're in right now with the number 1 overall pick, with your opportunity to go get your franchise quarterback, you don't know if you're going to be in that position again. And I know what they say next year, the quarterback class is supposed to be great, right? If you need a quarterback 2027, that's the draft that you want to do that. Well, you know what? That's what they said about 2026. So the Raiders are sitting there at number 1. If they truly believe, and I want you to hear this carefully, if they truly believe in Fernando Mendoza, I do, but it's not up to me. It's up to the Raiders. So if they truly believe that he's a guy that could be that difference-making quarterback, which, again, I believe he can be, they have to go get him. And the reason why it doesn't matter if they're not ready in other people on the outside's world, you know, the way that they're looking at the Raiders, well, they're not ready because there's so many holes. The New England Patriots are proof that it doesn't matter if you're not ready. Go get the guy. They drafted Drake May Not this past year, but the year before. He played 13 games his rookie year. He had 15 touchdown passes and 10 interceptions. He took 34 sacks. That was his rookie year. Wasn't very good. Their head coach got fired after 1 year. They went 4-13, and now they're in the Super Bowl. Right? Now they're in the Super Bowl after they went out and hired Mike Vrabel as their head coach, got Josh McDaniels in to be their OC, and Drake May is a guy that's in the MVP conversation. They did that a little bit early, but what did they do with their roster? Yeah, they got Drake May. Like I said, they might have got him a little bit early. They might not technically have been ready for him, but they went out. They spent a lot of money in free agency. Guess what? The Raiders have a lot of money. They went out there and they put weapons around Drake May. Guess what? The Raiders have a lot of draft capital, so they could put weapons, and they have weapons in Brock Bowers and Ashton Genty already, and Big Mike, Michael Mayer as well. So they already have a starting point with the weapons. Obviously, the offensive line has to be a number one priority. If you're going to go get the quarterback, go get the offensive line to help out as well. Not to mention, Fernando Mendoza doesn't have to start right away. Now, I'd like to see him start right away, but Tom Brady has been on the record multiple times of saying he doesn't believe in quarterbacks starting right away, that they should be, more seasoned before they actually get that opportunity. They should sit and learn and observe, and that's what Drake May did last year. He only played 13 games because they did not start him as a rookie. So you can do exactly what the Patriots did. I'm not saying that the Raiders are going to be 2 years away from the Super Bowl. I'm not saying that at all. But they went out and got their quarterback because they were in position to get their quarterback, right? So they got their quarterback, and then it didn't work out with Gerard Mayo. They fired him, got all the guys out of there that they didn't want anymore, and they brought in a really good coach. Well, the Raiders had Pete Carroll. Didn't work out with him. They fired him. They're in position to go get their guy, whether that's Klint Kubiak, whether that's Davis Webb, whether that's Mike McDaniel, or other. Right? They have a chance to go get their guy. So as long as they get the right head coach, get the right OC, and again, like Dan said, someone in the building who could develop them. The Raiders have to find someone in the building who's going to develop that young quarterback and continue to help develop him. He's already got a really good, as far as I'm as far as I'm concerned, he's got a really good starting point, right? Does he have to continue to grow? Absolutely. All quarterbacks do. Right? There's no doubt about that. But he's already got a good foundation and a starting point. So whether that's the head coach, the OC, a combination of both, those guys have to be able to develop them. And on top of that, patience to develop. So the Raiders as an organization, ownership has to be patient with the head coaching staff. There's going to be some bumps along the way. But as long as they're willing to ride it out, as long as they're willing to understand that this is a growing process, why wouldn't you go get your quarterback right now? It doesn't make any sense. And like I said, the Patriots are the perfect example. They got their quarterback. They weren't necessarily ready. They had no weapons for him at all, right? They had no offensive line. It wasn't very good. What they do this year, they went out and drafted an offensive lineman. They went out there and put a lot of weapons around him. They went up and built that defense, right? And again, they got the right head coach and OC, and now, boom, here they are. They're in the Super Bowl. As much as I hate to give them props and promote them because it's the Patriots, they absolutely did what the Raiders have the opportunity to do. So when everyone says, well, the team's not ready for this, the team's not ready for that, what do you mean? What do you mean when you're not ready? And I had someone call in on my radio show on Friday, and I thought it was great. And they said, Q, I listened to that they're not ready as the same as when I had my first kid. Like, no, you're never ready. You just go for it. You just do it, right? I mean, all of a sudden you find out you got a baby on the way. Well, I don't know if I'm ready for this, but okay, let's figure it out. That's what the same example, same thing that the Patriots did. They figured it out once they got their quarterback. The Raiders have the same opportunity to go get their quarterback and figure things out. They've got the assets as far as money. They got the caps. They got the draft capital, right, to be able to put weapons around them as well. And as long as they make the right decision, the head coach and OC, they should be in a really good position. So here's Dan Orlovsky, still on Unsportsmanlike on ESPN Radio, talking about, well, should the Raiders draft Fernando Mendoza? What is his thoughts?
I would tell you right now, because I haven't studied these guys, I would say right now I would take Mendoza if I was the Raiders. That's subject to change as you get into this process and study these guys. I haven't studied Fernando like that, but I do think because of the journey that he's been on, I value that. I value the struggle that he's had to experience. I value the, he didn't transfer to a team that had all these loaded weapons and you just had to kind of not mess it up. And I really value the performance on Monday night. Monday night, I thought was the most impressive thing that he did all season because it was more more like an NFL game. You're going to get your butt kicked. You're going to have really difficult moments. You're going to make mistakes, and you got to hang in there. And so I think that's a plus. The Raiders have so many issues and so many holes that you would certainly sit there and say you'd like a better landing spot for a quarterback. But I haven't studied Fernando to sit there and be able to say, nope, you don't move off of him. You take him and figure it out. Or I think he's a good player, but I don't know if he's the unmovable force at number one. So right now, I'd say you take him.
So there's Dan talking about he would take him right now. Right? Obviously, he has the right to change his mind. There's going to be plenty of film study. There's going to be plenty of scrutiny. The combine's coming up. Already got the, credential request in for that. So, there's going to be so many things that are going to be brought up. And, Fernando Mendoza this or Fernando Mendoza that. My dad even brought up on Saturday. I talk to him every Saturday after I get my haircut. He said, well, the history of quarterbacks, the Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks in the NFL. And he's not wrong. Right? You can go back and look at the whole list of quarterbacks that won the Heisman Trophy when they go to the NFL, what their track record is. It's not great, right? It isn't. But again, the Raiders have to figure that out. You have a nice talent to work with Fernando Mendoza, and you've got to build him up, right? I mean, look, there's guys like Joe Burrow, there's guys like Baker Mayfield, there's guys like Bryce Young that, figured out. And they don't all figure it out right away, right? They don't all make it work right away, but they've got to figure it out, right? And so those are just a few of the more recent examples, but he's not wrong, right? Again, I mean, there's documented history of quarterbacks that don't really make it after being Heisman Trophy winners, but I think Fernando Mendoza's got the want to, he's got the work ethic. Him and Tom Brady working together, I think, will be a great combination. So I think the Raiders are in a really good position. They really don't have any choice but to go get that quarterback. It's going to be a long 3 months, because it's going to be a lot of debate back and forth. Should they this? Should they that? Trade the pick, get more picks. Someone presented it to me the other day. Well, what if the Jets offer 4 picks? And I honestly don't think that's realistic. I don't see the Jets offering that many first-round picks to move up one spot to get them. I don't see that. Now, if they do, then obviously you have to think about it. But me personally, don't think that that's a realistic option and that they're really going to do that to go get Fernando Mendoza. Again, I could be wrong. I'm just, going with my gut feeling here, and like I say all the time, my gut feeling could be gas. It could be correct. It could be whatever the case may be. But I just don't see that as a reality. But the Patriots, who are now in the Super Bowl, Drake May in his second year in the NFL is the reason and the proof that you can get the quarterback before you're necessarily, and I say in air quotes, ready to have that QB. What's on your mind? Your calls and texts will close out the show. 707-654-4693. We'll hear from you next. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about another great sponsor we have here on the show, and that is Indeed. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. If you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. So if you're looking to hire someone and trust and believe, going through that right now at the radio station, looking to hire somebody, we have it up on Indeed. This is a true testimonial. So many actual really qualified candidates applied for the job. And that was, like I said, a true testimonial about Indeed and how it was seen by so many candidates so quickly. Sponsored jobs boost your post to the people who are the best match for your role and makes a real difference. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show, the Locked On Raiders podcast, get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard it on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Indeed. Get Indeed now. Use Indeed now. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Time to hear from you. Calls and texts, Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line 707-654-4693. I do want to thank you so much for making this the first listen of the day. We definitely appreciate that. Let's start off with a call from Dre in Florida. He's calling to talk about Klint Kubiak while he's walking his dog and watching the NFC Championship game. Here's Dre in Florida.
What's up, Q? It's Dre in Florida. I've texted a few times, but this is my first time calling. Walking my dogs and watching the game on my phone, and the Seahawks just scored again. If we do end up going with Klint, he's scheming some shit up out there. I know it's a family show. It's got to be my one time, but I could totally see him bringing with JSN in the backfield. I could totally see him bringing that to us and having that being Brock Bowers, where he gets lost coming out the backfield. Nobody's going to guard that. If they put a linebacker on that, nobody's handling that. But it seems like JSN is just getting lost out the backfield. I'm sure they'll look at the tape and adjust to it next year, but that's beautiful. He is scheming things up out there. And if we do end up going that route, which it seems like it, I'm all right with it, but it seems like it's that way. I'm very excited to see what he brings to the table offensively and how he'll get potentially Mendoza all out of what he gets out of Mendoza and the rest of the offense. Like, I'm very excited if that's the route we go. But the game's not over. This is a good game, by the way, but we'll see. All right, Q. Appreciate you.
Dr. DRE, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. And yeah, you're right. Family-friendly show for sure. But you're spot on when it comes to Kubiak's offense. He was definitely scheming some stuff up. He's super creative. I think that him being the offensive play caller for Seattle and Tom Brady being on the call for Fox, I think that's a big deal. If he is the guy for the Raiders, though, he can't be officially hired until after the Super Bowl. So that's just something that you have to wait out. But they can come to a verbal agreement. But again, you know how verbal agreements are. They sound good, they look good until you actually see the pen go to paper, right? Anything could happen. On a verbal agreement, they can say, yep, going to be the next head coach. Great. Schefter, you can come out with a tweet. You know, all is expected that Klint Kubiak's going to be the Raiders' next head coach. And then all of a sudden, something could happen. He can have a change of mind. Maybe they lose in the Super Bowl, and he's like, man, we're that close. I think we could run it back. And he changes his mind. Like, anything could happen. So verbal agreements are only that. A verbal agreement, that's all that they can come up with. So, again, you've got to have a couple plans. I think it's Kubiak, then Webb, then Coach Mike McDaniel as a fallback. But, again, we'll see how it all plays out this week. Thanks so much for the call. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a really good text from Alpha Raider. He actually texted last week at the end of the week, and we just couldn't get his text on. He said, hey, Q, it's the Alpha Raider. Thanks for being my first listen every day. I've been a Raider fan my whole life. My grandmother was a season ticket holder, so this team runs deep in my family. I really appreciate the show, but I want to be honest. Last year, I was frustrated by how the Rooney Rule was discussed, and I heard some of that again today. I understand your frustration is really about how teams execute the rule, not the idea of fairness, but I still hear more anger aimed at the Rooney Rule than at the conditions that made it necessary. This is a league that's over 70% minority, yet right now there are only 3 minority head coaches. That didn't happen by accident. It reflects a long pattern of organizations not giving qualified black and minority candidates a real shot. What makes it worse is that these same owners created and voted for the Rooney Rule because they knew there was a problem, and now many of them look for ways to get around it instead of actually fixing it. You're an influential voice, Q. I'd love to hear more focus on solutions and accountability for the teams and owners who created this, not just criticism of the policy meant to address it. I appreciate you in the platform. Just want the conversation to move toward equity instead of exhaustion. Love the show. That's from the Alpha Raider. Thanks so much for the text. I think it's fantastic. And I know a lot of people don't understand my frustration with the Rooney Rule. And I've said it 1,000 times that the idea of the Rooney Rule is great. I get it because there is, as you mentioned, there is an unbalance when it comes to who's the head coaches and who's not, and who's getting a fair shake and who's not. But the problem I have with it and why I get frustrated is, and the other thing is, I don't think this should be the Rooney Rule. I think it should be the Al Davis Rule. Because Al Davis hired people without a rule, right? He didn't need to check a box, right? And that's something to be proud of as a member of Raider Nation, right? He hired Amy Trask, first female CEO. He hired Art Shell. He hired Tom Flores. You know what I mean? He did all that without needing a rule. So first of all, it should be the Al Davis Rule, but that's not even part of my anger about it. My anger about it is because it's just a check a box. Right, teams are treating it as just check a box. So when Ejiro Evero or Vance Joseph or Nate Shieldhouse, even Mike McDaniel, when they when there's the tweet out like, oh hey, this guy's going to get interviewed, or the Raiders interested in Evero, they got an interview for him. Everyone immediately says, oh, it's just a Rooney Rule. Like, I hate that, and I hate that for the candidates. I don't hate that for the rule. I hate that for the candidates. That these guys who've been busting their backside for so long to earn their stripes in the coaching business, all of a sudden, as soon as their name gets brought up, it's like, oh, they're just a Rooney Rule interview. So they're already being dismissed and diminished. So I don't like that. I'm angry for them. Again, not angry against the rule. And the problem is, as you mentioned, well, let's work towards a solution. The only solution is ownership has to change, right? And that's not going to happen every day in the NFL, right? There's not going to be a coach or a owner decide to sell the team. But that's the only thing that can happen. That's how people start having more diversity when it comes to hiring. Ownership has to change, right? Because the one thing I know about business, and it's not just exclusive to the NFL. It's any business, any walk of life. You hire who you're comfortable with, right? So there's guys, I mean, look at the ownership in the NFL. Look how old a lot of these guys are, right? A lot of the owners are very old, and that's not a disrespect to them. I'm just saying they've been owning teams or they've been, alive for a very long time. And so they're kind of stuck in their ways and they're comfortable with who they're comfortable with. So you need new ownership to come in and start to say, hey, I'm comfortable with the Evero. I'm comfortable with the Vance Joseph. I'm comfortable with the Shieldhouse. You know what I mean? As opposed to, well, I just got to do this interview and check it off. That's really all you can do. I have John McClain, who's been covering the NFL for a very long time, I think 50 years now this year. And he was on my show one time. We were talking about this, and he said, Q, reality is, as much as it's not right the way that the ownership has hired coaches and don't hire minorities like we all think that they should, reality is no matter what rule you put in place, you can't force someone to hire someone that they don't want to hire. And that's with anything. I mentioned it, when I was talking about Indeed. We're hiring at the radio station. As a guy that's in charge of hiring, you know who I want to hire? People I'm comfortable with. People I know that can get the job done. You know what I mean? And that's how I got all my jobs in life. I've never got a job. Reality is, I've never got a job that I actually applied for. I've always got a job based off who I knew and that they knew me and they were comfortable with me. That's reality. And that's what happens. So you can't, no matter what rule you put in place, I just get frustrated for the candidates because every time you see a new minority candidate pop up, they're like, oh, that's just a Rooney Rule interview. And that sucks. Like, I would hate to be that guy. Oh, hey, we're going to interview Q Myers. Oh, he's just for the Rooney Rule. Like, I don't want to be that guy. You know what I mean? And maybe that's me being, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong. But that's the reality of it. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be just a box that you're checking. If you want to interview me and I have a real shot at this thing, cool, great. And I don't mind the practice interview or couple, but I don't want to be that guy every year. And remember, for so many years, it was like Leslie Frazier was always, he was requested and he was interviewed. T. Martin was requested and interviewed. And we all knew that they weren't getting the jobs. We just knew that they were, unfortunately, a box check. That's what the frustration is. Again, it's not the rule, it's the execution of it. And the only way that you can move it forward is ownership has to change. Ownership has to be more open to different people. And that's why I love the Raiders and what they do, because they've always been open to everybody. All they care about is you getting the job done. They don't care what you look like. They don't care, who you vote for. They don't care. You know what I mean? Like, none of that. They never cared about none of that. It never mattered. Can you get the job done? Are you qualified for it? That's all that ever mattered. And that's why, again, going back to the name of the rule, I always thought it should be the Al Davis rule, because he, again, never judged based off looks or who you were, sexuality, any of that stuff. It was always about, can you get the job done? So I know it's a long explanation. I understand your frustration with my frustration, but that's just where I'm coming from. But really good text, man. Fantastic stuff. Thanks so much for that. I do appreciate it. And we got time for one more call. Sorry, Ari. This is from Raider X. He's calling to talk about Klint Kubiak and what he saw from him in the NFC Championship game. Also talks a little bit of Davis Webb as well. Here's Raider X.
Yo, Q, this is Raider X. Just wanted to recap. Looks like we know our Super Bowl contenders now. And, just wanted to recap in regards to Klint Kubiak. That offense, a lot of imagination, a lot of creativity, a lot of practicality, which are all kind of, cross each other out by just the terminology, yet very efficient. I think we always talk about having the ability to get the most out of the players that you have on your roster. And you can see that by just the changing, the versatility, and then the unpredictability. Very, very efficient plays. Just want to go, overall and talk about, Sam Darnold looks like he's a very heady player. Obviously, he's a veteran. But I see a lot of similarities in the size, the stature, and the arm, and the decision-making with Kubiak along with Mendoza. And then you have Walker, which is very, very similar, to what we have for our running game. So it's very, very similar. Then you have the Brock Bowers component, which I know is not a high-flying, wide receiver, but the overall trickiness and the sure-handedness, I think, can be utilized greatly. Just hopefully, they're because they're going on to the Super Bowl, the Raiders have the ability to seal the deal, and they don't end up, walking home or leaving the situation, with the second choice. Sometimes, just to seal that deal, and I understand, sometimes the best things are worth waiting for. It's like for them to seal the deal. Like what the Broncos did with Stidham on how they prepared him. Obviously, that's a lot again with going back to Webb. Very, 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 very clean, very clear. Unfortunately, he doesn't have the skill set or the familiarity with some of the players there, so you could see that there was some mental breakdowns. Well, I think if we go between those two individuals, I think it'd be very, very nice to sit there and at least build that head coach on a future prospect. Like I said, my bank is for Kubiak. This is Raider X out.
X-Man, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. And what I saw from Kubiak, creativity. What I saw from Kubiak was keeping the defense of the Rams, on their heels, right? It was nothing that they can settle in and be like, okay, this is coming, right? I mean, you touched on it. It was perfect. That to me is a big deal. Webb, I think, is very capable as well for the reasons that you mentioned. I think that the biggest key for Webb, if he's going to get that job, is bringing along an OC that is very much experienced, like a Brian Daboll, who the Raiders interviewed on Saturday. Somebody that's been there, done that, and has been in that chair so he can help guide him a little bit. So I think that if it's going to be Webb, I can look at Brian Daboll as being the OC. Again, they interviewed Daboll and Brady over the weekend, and I don't think either one of those were really jobs for the head coach. I think it was more of the OC. Maybe even Brady was a guy that they talked about for Klint Kubiak. Maybe Kubiak said, hey, Joe Brady is a guy that I'd be interested in. But we'll learn a lot. Quick, fast, and hurry when it comes to the Raiders head coaching search. That is for sure this week. It's guaranteed to heat up. But thanks so much for that call. Appreciate you. Got a text from Peter P. We'll get that coming up tomorrow. Just don't have enough time for it right now. We'll get more calls and texts. We'll have more news and notes. And like I said, I think a lot of things with the head coaching search for the Raiders is really going to heat up this week. We also got the Raiders Squad Show coming up later on this morning. So depending on what time you're listening to this, it's 7:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. Chantel Chan, Lincoln Kennedy, and myself, 1 hour long, 1 hour strong. YouTube, it's going to be live. It's going to be a lot of fun. So definitely check that out. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.